The Warriors have a bit of a dire situation in terms of what will happen when they get to the playoffs. They don't have to worry about this right now because they're deep enough to be able to handle most of the teams around the league. But if the Warriors want to be the strongest version of themselves going into the playoffs, they need a super reliable piece at the shooting guard spot, the starting shooting guard spot, as well as a guy who's going to close for them at that spot. Obviously, this is one of the key things that we've been talking about throughout the entire course of the season, and we have concluded that De'Anthony Melton is that guy for the Warriors. Unfortunately, you all should know by now, De'Anthony Melton is now out for the season, and he's going to become a free agent over the summer. So essentially, the Warriors have lost Melton for good. I don't think they're going to re-sign him after he suffered an ACL injury that's going to keep him out for the rest of the season. So their guard depth chart right now looks like Lindy Waters, Pods, Moses Moody, and GP2, although the Warriors don't really consider him a two guard, right? He's usually at the small forward spot or something like that. And of course, they have Buddy Hield as well, but we all know at this point that Buddy Hield is not fit to be a starter for the Warriors because of that disconnective defense. Now, every single name that I just mentioned are not good enough to give the Warriors 30 plus minutes at the shooting guard spot come playoffs. That's a reality. And that means the Warriors absolutely must go and get a consolidation piece that replaces Melton as the go-to shooting guard for the Warriors. This is basically a prerequisite, non-compromisable. It needs to be done. Now, when will this get done? We have to be very patient in that regard because obviously the trade deadline is nowhere near. And like I said, the Warriors are perfectly capable of beating up on a lot of teams around the league, even without a guy like Melton. Of course, there's a lot of different pieces for the Warriors to look at when it comes to potential trade scenarios or ideas. The Warriors don't necessarily have to go get some kind of powerhouse player, some kind of $40 million per year type, like a Zach LaVine or Jeremy Grant or something along those lines. Just like Melton was simply a valuable asset and the Warriors didn't necessarily know whether he was going to be the starter or he's going to come off the bench. Whatever the case may be, they got a player that kind of is a glue piece and does a little bit of everything that fits really well with the style of play that the Warriors go with in the Steve Kerr system. Mike Dunleavy and his team needs to scour the league and look for these types of gems. Chris Dunn is a really good example. He was with the Jazz last season and ultimately he ended up with the Clippers this season. I don't think anybody saw Chris Dunn as their potential starting shooting guard somewhere along the way, but he's a really great POA connective player, is capable of giving you some two-way play. These kinds of gems are all around the league, whether it's in the G League, whether they're rotting in other teams' benches, or they are useful players, just like Melton was for the Sixers. He'd be a spot starter here and there for the Sixers, but ultimately he was seen as a bench guy. And the Warriors could bring in a piece like that off the bench who could give you 25 something minutes and just kind of plug right into that shooting guard spot. I'm telling you, Lindy Waters is a nice connective piece. I would say that he's a neutral piece from a defensive standpoint, but he's not going to be giving you 30 minutes in the playoffs. Potts is not giving you 30 minutes as a starter in the playoffs. Buddy Hield's not doing that, and neither is GP2. So this is a necessary piece. It's something that we will keep an eye on as the season progresses. Teams are going to start, dropping off, and they're going to make decisions about how to move forward with their team. And they're going to be like, oh, we don't need this player or that player anymore. We're going to put up this guy for trade, and we'll see how things end up, and we'll see what possible move that the Warriors can make somewhere down the line. I think it's a little too early to be talking about names. Just know that this is a thing that must happen before the deadline. Having said that, the Warriors did not need Melton for tonight's game against the Hawks. Lindy Waters started once again, and honestly, he's nothing explosive or anything like that. He's just like a connective piece that is there. If he's wide open for a three-point shot, he's capable of hitting that for you. He's capable of stretching the floor. He's capable of somewhat playing that clay role on offense, coming off the curls and being a threat or a danger from a shooting standpoint. And that does open up the floor a little bit. That shooting ability really kind of opens up the floor for the entire team. And that's the connective ability that he has. And for the regular season, I think with the depth that they have on the bench, that the Warriors can absolutely continue to play really well with him in the starting lineup. And that's what we saw with the Hawks tonight. Now, the Warriors got out to an amazing start once again. This game got close to a 30-point lead. And well, we've seen what can happen to 30-point leads when the Warriors have them. And tonight, once again, whatever that close to 30-point lead was, it started to dwindle down as the third quarter went down. And by the fourth quarter, it was down to 13 points. It was a 13-point game. Another kind of dangerous situation if you continue to give the Hawks the kind of momentum that they were building. And so Steve made a quick adjustment in that fourth quarter. That was a necessary move, so I appreciated it. He brought some starters back in. He brought Wiggins back into the game. He brought Trace, and Lindy also came into the picture, and an order was somewhat restored. And then Draymond and Steph came in, and actually this team finally closed the game with the original starters. And they were able to completely restore order, and the game was a blowout once again with about, 5 minutes left. By the 3-minute mark or so, the Hawks had emptied their bench, and so did the Warriors. And this is what I've been trying to say all along, is that Steve is so keen on going small. It's like, hey, you keep forgetting to consider the possibility of closing with possibly your best defensive closing lineup with most offensive versatility in terms of that center spot. So you put Trace in there and you have Draymond in there, and your defense is just much more reliable from a rebounding standpoint, from a switchability standpoint at the power forward and center spot, as well as help defense. And Draymond and Trace, as you guys can see, are starting to build a little more of that chemistry. They're running some actions with each other directly, where they're running some pick and rolls and running certain plays where a guy like Trace ends up in a mismatch through some of these multiple screens. That's why some of these plays you see Trace going up for a dunk, a pass from Draymond on the short roll, and Trae Young is there. What is a guy like Trae Young going to do against a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis, who is 6'10" and jumping out of the gym to catch an alley-oop? Absolutely nothing. So these are the types of plays that they can include to maximize Trace's ability to finish around the rim. And finally, he had a chance to close. He only played 22 minutes still, but in those 22 minutes, he was incredibly productive. 14 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, a block, 6 of 11 from the field, finally hit both of his free throws. I mean, I just don't think that you can ask for better from the center spot in terms of overall production. The Hawks ultimately couldn't really get anything going against that unit. So I hope to continue to see Steve give Trace more opportunities, because he already showed us the capability of closing games last season. So there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to do it this season. Anyway, with about 9 minutes left in that fourth quarter, Andrew Wiggins came in, and he really just had an immaculate game all around. Just really bothering a guy like Trae Young, and he just couldn't get anything going for most of the night. And talk about two-way play: 27 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 12 of 17 shooting from the field. I mean, this is just complete and utter domination. And I think there have been many games where Wiggins played really well, and he just didn't get enough minutes to continue that production, just like against the Clippers, right? So now we have to get into this rotational situation, this 12-man rotation thing. Steve Kerr's been going with that this whole time, and we're starting to see where the cracks are and what the problems are when you do something like this. The most important thing that I noticed tonight is that, well, when you have 12 guys in rotation, because we're starting to suffer injuries, right? Melton is gone for the season, and Pods went down tonight. He's day-to-day now because he got hit in the nose again. And the thing about having a deep roster is that when somebody goes down, the deeper your rotation, the better the guy that's coming in to replace the guy that's injured. That's the beauty of a deep roster. But when you have all of those guys in rotation at the same time, well, you're risking injury to any guy on any given night. Every single game you do this. And that's really not smart. And that's really not a great way to take advantage of that deep roster that you have. So to make sure that they can absolutely take advantage, full advantage of that depth, you have to make sure that certain guys are not playing. It just is what it is. You cannot continue to go with this 12-man rotation for that reason alone. But also, it takes opportunities away from guys that should be getting more minutes, and they can't because there's too many guys that have to get minutes. And it's really hard to get into a true rhythm of a game as a rotational player when you're constantly getting something like 15 minutes per game, when you should be getting something closer to 25 minutes per game. Look at Jonathan Kuminga, for example. He came out just very focused and he played really well tonight. Ultimately, he only ended up getting 15 minutes. A lot of the fan base is very upset with that. I don't think you should be upset when the Warriors win a game by 23 points. I think you're prioritizing the wrong thing here. Ultimately, you want to see the best combinations that make the Warriors the best version of themselves. And well, if it comes at a blowout win and the lineup that Steve ended up putting out was massively successful, then why would you be complaining about Kuminga's minutes? But also, if they shorten the rotation, we'll simply have less nights where a guy like Kuminga ends up getting only 15 minutes because there's more minutes to be had when there's less guys in rotation. It's really that simple. Now, Kuminga ended up shooting poorly from the field. He was 3 of 9 ultimately. But I thought his overall energy and everything else that he was doing was actually pretty good. The rebounding was pretty good. He made some plays to start the game, a couple of steals, a block. This is the kind of production that we want to see from Kuminga, like all-around play. Oh, and obviously there was a big matchup between Steph Curry and Mr. number 1 guy in steals in the league, Dyson Daniels. What would he do against Steph Curry? And, well, it didn't really matter too much. Steph did have a bunch of careless turnovers. What else is new? But ultimately, he shot 7 of 10 from the field for 23 points, 8 assists, just immaculate on both ends of the floor once again. Two-way play. And while Draymond didn't do anything spectacular tonight, he was just all-around connective, playing really well together with Trace. 9.7 rebounds, 9 assists, a steal, a couple of blocks, just an all-around game. Now, when we talk about shortening the rotation, well, obviously, certain guys are going to have to sit out. Based on what we've seen so far, I would say that Moody and Pods are ultimately the 2 guys that they may have to sit out to run a 10-man rotation. Pods has just been struggling way too much. I think he needs to get his head right. Obviously, he got hit in the nose again, like I said before. And he just needs to reorganize, recapture some of that confidence. Maybe he needs to go down to the G League. If you guys remember, Jordan Poole in his second season also came out really poorly. And then he had a trip down in the G League and came back a completely different player. Maybe Potts needs something like that. And Moody has just simply been too inconsistent from a two-way play standpoint. He just hasn't been connective enough, and especially when they go with the all-bench unit, those units just seem to kind of fall apart, and Moody is typically included with those lineups. I mean, tonight in a game where the Warriors are dominating, the guy is somehow a -10. So if you take those 2 guys out, now you have a 10-man rotation. Now you say, oh, but they don't have a backup point guard. What do we do here? Potts is the only one. He's not really making a whole lot of plays as a point guard. I'm telling you, he needs to shore up his confidence in everything that he does. First of all, he needs to get his shot right because that is going to initiate everything, including his ability to pass the ball. Because the threat of his shot is going to change how the defense is going to play him. So the next best playmaker in that scenario would actually be Slow-Mo as a point forward type, and he's very capable of doing that. And he has a size and savvy advantage against a lot of guys that play his position. You mix that in with whatever Kuminga can do with the bench unit, and Kuminga will be well protected because it'll be Slow-Mo and Kevon Looney, allowing him to play the 3. And I think the Warriors can really organize a 10-man rotation doing it this way. Unfortunately for Moody, it just is what it is. To be honest with you, I was really surprised when they decided to sign him for the amount that they did, given the lack of use and, well, he hasn't really proven anything other than that he's a very mature young individual who's willing to do whatever it is that the team is asking of him. And we just haven't seen anything consistent enough. He's shooting really well, don't get me wrong. He's improved in some aspects of his game, but he's still not that ultimate two-way connective piece that the Warriors are looking for to contend for a title. Ultimately, it's great to see the Warriors take care of business against a mediocre team at home after blowing that game against the Clippers. And they have 2 more games coming up this week against more mediocre teams like the Pelicans and the Spurs. They should be able to take care of both of those teams. The Spurs might be a bit of a challenge, but I think the Warriors are perfectly equipped to beat a team like that. And then they'll be 13-3. And they'll stay atop the Western Conference and continue on this trajectory of a dominant season. But again, the playoffs is a whole different animal. We'll see how things go. That's all I got for now. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.